Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this very special edition of the Christmas Open Door Show. Well, the reason it's special is because we've put up some decorations behind us. I don't know if you can see those. If you like those, hopefully you do. Quite a lot of effort has gone into that, as you can see. So yeah, it's our last show before Christmas. Hey, what do you think about that? Who's upset? Come on. Obviously, I'm sure you are. You're upset, yeah? Well, I'm not. I could do it a couple of weeks off, but don't hold back the tears. Let them out, because at the end of the day, we will be back in January. So just let them all out and just go with it. Anyway, my name is Richie Clapson, and I'm here with the other half of Property CEO, Mr. Ian Child.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, look at that. He's full of the joys of spring, isn't he? Anyway, it's great to have you here. And just in case this is your first time, and for some of you it might be, and so you're on our last show of 2020, let me tell you what you've let yourself in for. Our aim is to give you 45 minutes of non-stop positivity all around the theme of business and property development. Isn't that right, Ian?
Certainly is. Richie and I run a company called propertyCEO. And basically, our job is to train people how to become successful small-scale property developers. Some amazing opportunities out there right now, particularly for new developers, even more opportunities after today's show. So we want to help people find out more about those opportunities and basically to see if development might be a good fit for them.
That's right. Of course, global pandemic this year, 2020, been a bit of fun, isn't it? I guess. Obviously, don't forget non-stop positivity in these four walls, but a lot gone on this year. But it is what it is, isn't it? But now we've got the vaccine, whatever you think of that. Some people saying, oh, I'm not going to have a vaccine. Okay, whatever your choice is. But the vaccine is out there. It's starting to happen. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, though, let's not forget we're going to have a recession. But recessions are great for developers. They're terrific opportunities, but only for those that seek them out to start rather than waiting for everything to settle down. As always, we'll be doing a bit of predictions, particularly around the theme of planning this evening. We often have guests, not this evening. You just got us two this evening, which I'm sure is going to be your favourite show anyway. But above all, we're going to have a bit of fun doing it. Please put questions in the chat box. If we don't have any questions, we really don't have much of a show. So make it a good one, please, for us at the end of 2020. Get lots of questions in, would be great. So who's on this evening? There's a stack of you on this evening, actually, more than probably we've had for a long, long time. You're just seeing us off to the end of 2020 in style. Let's see who's on. Have a look down here. So Damien's on, Patrick, Raj, Teresa, Andrew, Roma, Mark, Cowshed Clive. Hang on. Hello, Bob. Good evening, Bob. So Bob's Cowshed Clive this evening. He deals with barns. That's one of our students. Martin's on. Hello, Martin. Good evening to you. Tony's on. Gavin's on. Ranjit's on from Property Investor News, everyone. That's his last mention before 2020. Who else is on? Ashley, Paddy, Rob, Debs, Giovanni, Emily, George, Will, Josh, etc., etc., etc. Can't mention you all, I'm afraid. But hopefully, well, Nigel's on. Nigel, I hope you're recovering. I know you had a little operation recently, so I'm sure you're well. And Marilyse, hello to you. Anyway, well, who else says hello? So Deb says, "Where's your Christmas jumpers? We have ours on." Well, Deb, we only have your word for that.
We've got the bauble, although actually I've noticed that one of us has got bigger baubles than the other one. I don't know how that happened.
Not necessarily appropriate. It's a family show, but there we go. So Richie, we meet at last. Can't see you, Mark Holland. Everyone else can see us. Hopefully, give us a wave if you can see and hear us. Mark can't, but give us a wave if the rest of you can. Mark, it's just you. Just play around with your camera settings, Mark. They're out there somewhere. And Joe says they've changed their shirts from this morning.
No expense spared on this show, I can tell you.
Yeah, the wardrobe, Joe, always look after us. They make sure that we can get things sorted. And Gavin says, ho, 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 Jack Frost roasting on an open fire. Good evening, chaps. Evening, gents, says Andrew. A lot of you are saying good evening. I can't do all the good evenings this evening, I'm afraid, because there's lots going on there. And Mark says, I can see Ian and hear you both. Well, you can't see me. Well, there you go. Mark, take that as a positive. So, a lot of you don't want to see me, but you have to. Anyway, so welcome. This evening, there is some exciting news going on. I tell you what, anyone out there who's in property development, which is going to be a large proportion of you on this evening, you have just had the biggest Christmas present that you are ever going to get, I tell you, in property development. Absolutely. And those that are thinking about going into property, seriously consider it now. Okay, if you're messing around with HMOs and buy-to-lets, change your life in 2021. Do something that could make you a lot of money. It's not easy, but it's entirely possible. Let's not like it as a breeze, but the government have just handed us potentially something on a plate, which is going to make property development for new startups, for new property developers, probably it's going to make it the easiest business to get into in years. I don't think you're ever going to get this again. So we're going to start this evening with a bit of an update what's going on. So Ian's going to give us a few minutes of an update of this great, exciting news that has happened just last week. Ian.
Well, so my warm-up man doing a sterling job there. So I better deliver. Definitely been a very interesting year in the world of planning. I think last week's guest Colin Smith said it all. You know, we've had 10 years worth of planning changes in about 10 months. And yet still, government keeps on making changes. And as Richie said, this time it's quite a biggie. So if we cast our mind back, 1st of September 2020, basically what the government did is amalgamated a number of non-residential use classes into a new kind of superclass. So it was kind of grouping together commercial properties, business type properties, retail, cafes, light industrial, and many others. And rather than have them in separate use classes, it decided we're going to create this superclass that they called Class E. And what that effectively did is then, because all those things were now in the same class, you could kind of move between them. If you had something that was commercial and you needed it to be retail, you didn't need to apply for planning permission. You already had the right to do it because it's already in that class. So there were lots of then changes that you could do, but the dreaded R word was missing from that calculation, the R word being residential. But then that's when last week's bombshell came out. The government announced that they're going to make some more changes in the world of permitted development. And basically they're proposing that there'll be a new permitted development right that allows us to change the use from Class E, which is all those things now combined, all those different types of properties, to residential use. Now, it's proposed that that new right will come into effect on the 1st of August next year. It's a consultation document, and I can actually read to you what they said in the document, just to give you some, I won't read it all out. But there was the thrust of it. We want to support our town centres and high streets in adapting to these changes to become thriving, vibrant hubs where people live, shop, use services and spend their leisure time. So a big thrust of what they're trying to do here is to revitalise the town centres. Some other things that are quite relevant: no size limit on the buildings that can be converted. So you could convert the entirety of a large building. You could equally just convert part of a building. They have indicated that they're going to be using the prior approval route for the conversion of larger buildings. So they're mindful of the fact that there's going to be some sensitivity when converting larger buildings, and the prior approval process, which is where you have to submit your proposals to the local planning authority for them to approve it based on a set of criteria before you can go ahead. However, that's much less onerous than going for full planning permission. But the usual rules apply with regards to listed buildings and monuments, so those are excluded. But interestingly, conservation areas aren't. And of course, a lot of town centres are in conservation areas, and the government recognises that if they exclude conservation areas, that kind of rules out a lot of what they're trying to achieve here by having this redevelopment of our town centres. So the fact that it's in a conservation area doesn't prohibit you from taking advantage of the permitted development right. What I think will happen, and what they've kind of indicated, is that there may be within the prior approval process an opportunity for the local planning authority to have a view if you're converting things like shop fronts, so ground floor shop fronts that are in a conservation area, to preserve the street scene and so on and so forth. So we can expect to find some rules on that front. They've introduced a new fee system as well. There'll be a fee of, they're proposing £96 per dwelling house. So if you've got 10 flats, then you're going to have be paying over £960, and they've capped that at a maximum of 50 units, so the max you pay is just shy of £5,000. And they actually led in the press release with the second part of the document, which is all about public buildings. So they are looking to make it easier to build new and extend schools, hospitals, other public buildings and service infrastructure. So that is a big part of what this is all about, and also making that much more streamlined so it happens more quickly. The third part of what they're proposing is to kind of consolidate some of the permitted development rights that we've already got. So you probably worked out that there are already some rights that allow us to convert from, for example, a commercial, from an office building into residential, from retail into residential, and so on. And this new proposal kind of cuts across those. So there'll be some rights that will go by the by because they're no longer needed. They've been superseded by this. There are some other rights that exist where there are some particular parameters regarding maybe size limits, other restrictions or covenants that apply to how you can convert buildings. And so they kind of recognize that there's a job to be done there to sort that out so that we end up with a cohesive set of permitted development rights that applies for all these different types of building. So there, it's all going on. I think it's certainly one of the biggest changes I think we've seen. I don't know what else is yet to come from the government in terms of other surprises. The year is running out, and I know they've got quite a lot on at the moment, but it just seems to keep on coming, a consistent stream of changes. They do have their work cut out though, in terms of some of their other changes on the planning side with regards to, mainly to do with the way in which the power is moving away from local authorities, and the concern that that throws up in terms of development becoming a little bit out of control. That's a kind of separate argument. I think one of the main arguments, or one of the main topics of discussion that I anticipate would happen with these particular set of proposals within the consultation process is that there doesn't seem to be a great deal of language outside of conservation areas about how you prevent the entirety of a town centre becoming residential. And so I think that may well come out in the mix. It could be that councils start issuing Article 4 directives to kind of protect themselves. But again, there's clearly got to be a balance so that the governments will kind of prevail, just in terms of it can't block wholesale development or repurposing of buildings. I think it's all really about achieving that aim that the government that I read out from the document, which is getting that balance of a sort of cohesive town centre that's got people living in it with other services and things to do, making it a destination for people to go to as well as live in, and bringing them back to life. Worth also saying that, quite apart from the fact there's no size restrictions at the moment, there are also, it applies to any part of England. So it's just England, but it's not just town centres. So these types of building that are now in Class C, they can be converted wherever they are. They don't have to be in a town centre. And actually, there's quite a few buildings, I think, that are now encompassed within this that weren't actually on the radar before. So they previously didn't have any opportunity to be converted, things like gyms and so on. And now they're in an environment where they can be converted. So very, very exciting times. And Richie, I think we've had just a handful of questions on the subject, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, well done, Ian. I mean, as you can see how exciting this news is in how excited Ian was when he delivered it. I mean, he was over the top, wasn't he? I mean, he just couldn't contain himself. So, you know, that's great. Just as a little bit of fun, Dom's on this evening. He says, geez, what's the shirts? It's cracking up my screen. And he said, Burton's have obviously gone bust. You guys look like you've been left scavenging in Oxfam now. My gran had a kitchen tablecloth like that in 1972. That's the thanks we get for the effort we put in here. What do you think?
I think that's terrible. I think that's absolutely terrible. The efforts that we went to look like this, it's taken years.
Excellent, good stuff. So Grigor, you're out there. You've got a bit of a problem with audio for some reason, perfectly for everything else, but not your webinar. Goodbye, he says. Well, if you can hear this in any shape or form, you will get it on the replay. So hopefully you can see that. So yeah, we have got a question. We've got quite a few questions, as you say, coming in. First one in from Julian. Should we wait for the changes to come into effect? I'm assuming he's saying before we purchase anything. Well, let me just jump in with that, because Ian's been rabbiting on for ages, getting all excited. He's going to have to calm down. Julian, yes, you should. Okay, don't go out and just purchase something straight away on the basis that you think it's all going to be perfect, because this is a consultation document, as Ian said. It's got to go through that, and ultimately, you know, you've got to get to a position where it's going to be approved. So at the end of January, if the consultation document is accepted and then this comes into play, you could be thinking then about looking forward to maybe purchasing something. The only thing I'd say around that is, if you're going to try and purchase something, then what's going to happen, if you're going to buy it with cash, that's fine, that's up to you. But if you try and get commercial funding, they might need a bit of explaining, and they might be slightly hesitant, because actually it won't come into the 1st of August. So if you end up with a building that you can't get any planning permission on, are you likely, i.e. permitted development rights, are you likely to get the funding? Perhaps not. So yes, you should wait for the changes to come into effect to actually make sure you secure it. But of course, if they're approved at the end of January, you can now start to look at those buildings. But I certainly would not be exchanging on a building until I knew this was in place. Right, do you want to pick up the next one, Ian?
Yeah, we've got one here from Mike, who asked, will space standards still apply to the new rules that you mentioned? And Mike, yes, they will. So from, I think it's the 6th of April, basically space standards will apply to all permitted development from that point onwards. That was obviously as a result of one of the bigger discussions that happened from a political perspective, and is designed obviously to prevent the situation that has happened in a limited number of cases, but it's still been a real issue where people have created these very small flats with no windows, sort of 16 square meter flats, which is way too small. So space standards comes in. That means that your minimum 1-bed flat would be a 37 square meter flat, unless your local planning authority dictated otherwise. So everything kind of moves up a level, but that doesn't really prejudice us as developers, because it's a level playing field, as we've said before. So it's not as if your competitors have got an opportunity to build anything any different. It perhaps means that those buildings are slightly less valuable, because developers aren't going to be able to get exactly the same margins from them. But aside from that, from a development perspective, it's still a level playing field.
Okay, excellent. Mike, hope that's answered your question. Pardeep's got a question in here, and I'm going to fire this one straight at you. Will these PD changes also apply to Article 4 areas?
Well, so Article, that's where I think there's quite an interesting dynamic going on. So Article 4 is the directives that basically allow local councils to override the kind of national planning regulations. So where there would be a right generally to be able to do things from a planning perspective using permitted development, then Article 4 can supersede that. And it's typically done. One area is very common is when you get a proliferation of HMOs. So, you know, for example, in a student area, you get a lot of buildings that are converted into student HMOs, changes the character of the area, the residents get upset, and so the council decides that enough's enough. Rather than have a student town, they want to keep the mix of people there as a sort of a balance, and so they prevent any more HMOs being converted using this Article 4 direction. I think what's going to be interesting here is, I guess in theory, the local councils could issue Article 4 directives, and it'd be interesting to see then how they butt up against this new PD right. We've got to bear in mind what the government's perspective is here. It is trying to regenerate the town centres, and it's trying to create new housing. We've had, I think it's something like 54,000 homes built as a result of the PD rights to date. It needs to be building 300,000 homes a year, and it sees it as a great opportunity here to really get quite a whole raft of new homes done and change town centres at the same time. So it could be that we end up in a kind of bit of a frictional situation where if the local planning authorities are worried about the loss of control, they're worried about how town centres becoming housing estates, then yeah, what is the way in which they can manage that? So there could be some tension. I think there's going to be a load of discussion, and it remains to be seen. But what I suppose I would say is that the government is likely to prevail here. There needs to be a sensible compromise to make sure that we end up in this place where, yeah, we don't want every single building in a town centre to be a flat. We need a balance, and equally, we don't want any one town to be completely out of bounds for this. So it sounds like there will be a compromise if Article 4 start getting thrown around. Worth saying also that it is a public consultation. So if you feel strongly on the subject, well, the way the government's laid it out is quite sensible. They've broken it down in their document. You can get it from the government's website, and they are asking very specific questions, quite open questions on each section. So it is not just open to the lobby groups, the opposition, and people in the industry. It's open to absolutely everybody, and you have until the 28th of January to submit your response online through a questionnaire. I'm not entirely sure when the results will be announced. That's going to be clearly later than that. But certainly the plan is that it will be implemented, whatever's agreed will be implemented on the 1st of August next year. There we go.
Excellent, good stuff. Hopefully that has answered that question for Paddy. Joe, evening Joe, who said we changed our shirts from this morning because he was on our Q&A. He's one of our students this morning. Do you think councils will stop projects where it is perceived a loss of employment will result from the loss of the shops or the retail space, i.e. will the loss of employment be a criteria? I don't believe it is. I think if I'm right in saying, Ian, I know Ian's done a lot more research on this than I have over the last week, and I think the criteria is very similar to the current PD rights. There's flood, there's contamination, there's some noise issues, there's highways, but I don't think loss of employment is in there. Am I correct with that, Ian?
It's the usual. The only ones that they've kind of added in, aside from flooding, transport, and contamination, are things like noise, natural light, fire safety. So I think the devil will be in the detail in some of these, what gets put on the prior approval list. But at the moment, I think that from memory, that's it. Flooding, transport, contamination, noise, natural light, and fire safety.
So in theory, Joe, we shouldn't have that problem. Okay, Paddy says thank you, no problem at all. And Sumi had a question in and says thanks, it's already been answered. So that's good. We must have answered that with another one. Do you want to pick one up, Ian?
Let's have a look. What about pubs? I think that this is from Jackie. Jackie, if I presume you mean about converting pubs rather than you're desperate to attend one. Can we convert them, or are they still out of bounds? They are still out of bounds, or at least I think broadly as out of bounds as they were. Again, if you saw last week's show, Colin Smith gave us some thoughts on pubs, which didn't rule them out and make them impossible, but they are more difficult to convert. I think one of the things that the document has made very clear in this consultation document is that pubs and other sort of public performance spaces and the like are to be protected. So they sit outside of these changes, and so they're not going to be affected by this. So the previous kind of rules apply. But in pubs, you do have a sensitivity there because pubs are extremely popular, and they're popular even in places where nobody seems to go to the pub, but they still want to have a pub, and it's a kind of a cultural thing. So you will encounter challenges in getting a change use to pub, but speak to your planning consultant. I'm sure they'd be able to advise you.
There we go, Jackie. Mark's question. He says, Richie, Ian, on a less than 500 square metre industrial to residential conversion, what would be the typical number of contractors you would deal with, and who would these be? For example, would you have a main contractor to sublet to the steel contractor, metal decking contractor, concrete contractor, etc., with you as the developers being the end client rather than the main contractor? Okay, Mark, interesting question. But one thing, first of all, to say, industrial conversions less than 500 square meters, you're probably thinking about the permitted development rights that we had that run out in September this year, which was B1C conversion to C3 residential, and it had to be less than 500 square meters to do that. That permitted development right had gone in September. We've been talking that there is the ability to do things with light industrial under the new class called ZA, which is demolition and rebuilding residential. But what Ian's described here this evening, these new rights encompass light industrial B1C because they're all part of Class E, the new Class E, so they can be converted to residential with no space standard. There's no space standard, sorry, with no space limit. Okay, so the 500 square meter rule is out the window. So just to mention that thing, in terms of how many contractors, well, there's a significant amount, because you're only going to talk about a steel contractor, you're going to be talking about electricians, you're going to be talking about plasterers, you know, you're going to be talking about plumbers and so on and so forth, decorators. Always the way that we would suggest, Mark, that you do development is you act as a CEO, you act as a property CEO, which is hence the name of this company and how we teach people. We teach people to be the CEO and leverage everything out. You do not want to be running individual subcontractors to do projects, okay? Even if you've got the experience, and if you haven't, you definitely don't want to be doing it. Even if you've got the experience, it's not a good use of your time. We always think that anyone that gets into property development want to be rich in two things, and whatever rich means to you, it could just mean a few 100,000, it could be million, it doesn't matter, okay? But you want to be rich in money and rich in time. You don't want to just have lots of money, so leverage is important. So you want to get basically a project manager that runs a main contractor, and the main contractor runs the whole breadth of all the subcontractors. Hopefully that's answered that question, Mark, and also given you a bit of clarity just on that industrial conversion right that's gone and the potential new one that's coming in, just to give you a bit of a heads up on that. Ian, do you want to go for one?
So I can close a couple off quite quickly. Certainly one from Tom. Do the new proposed rules relate to Wales? No, they don't. So Wales and Scotland have their own planning rules. So this is covering England only. And one here from Paul. What will happen to the rights that allows developers to convert offices and shops currently? So as I said, there are already some rights that enable us to convert, do commercial conversions, retail conversions, and so on. So they're going to be maintained. So that right will still exist. However, come the 1st of August next year, assuming there's no changes, then effectively those rights will, I think, lapse in favor of this new right, and so they just effectively get superseded. So that won't change your ability to convert those buildings, or shouldn't do. As ever, I think one of the caveats to add to this is that it is a consultation document, so and it isn't written in legalese, so there is devil may well be in the detail, and certainly what comes out of the back end, there may well be some tweaks to it, but I can't see any reason why they would that they would do anything to prejudice the existing rights that already exist and just transition into the new ones.
Okay.
That helps.
Christian's put a comment in. Thanks for the heads up, guys. He says, however, I have seen in this business that getting a deal is the problem. Yep, you're not right. It's not easy, Christian. Entirely possible, but it's not easy. Okay. Everyone always says that using Rightmove to talk to people or a sourcer. So in your own case, can you please tell me how you're different in this direction? Okay, if I'm understanding the question correctly, Christian, the thing here is, in terms of our suggestion how you find deals is multi-pronged. There's lots of ways that you tackle to go and find a deal. The portals are there, and we definitely have a good range of students that have gone out and found some really successful deals on the portals. The key thing about anything is actually knowing what you're looking for and knowing how to think out the box, okay? If you know what to do with a deal that other people don't know, then you can find something that's on one of the portals that other people just brush by. They don't know what to do with it. So it's more about thinking out the box than it is just finding the deal. Having said that, there are ways that you find deals off market, okay? There are off market processes that you can adopt to search for deals and particular types of buildings, okay? And then approach owners. And then there is the process of building relationships, okay? And who do you need to build relationships with? Largely commercial agents and others, and networking. There's various processes that you need to go through. It's not just the portals, but the portals are there if you know what to do with them. But there's lots of other ways that you tackle deals. I could probably sit and talk to you for another half hour at least on that, Christian, and still only scratch the surface. But hopefully that just gives you a bit of a flavour this evening. Shall I jump straight in with another one from Martin? Good evening, Martin. Nice to see you again. Martin says, B8 storage and distribution is still excluded, whereas light industrial B1 is now in Class E. You're absolutely right, Martin. Spot on. He says, do you think that B8 might get into Class E in the future? An opinion, Martin? I think not. Okay. And the reason I think that is the new Class E that was changed over, okay, from the 1st of September, and it was announced a bit before that. We didn't quite know where the government was going until they've released this latest announcement, and now it all makes sense. There's obviously a bigger picture that they release in stages to get these things sorted and get them through. So the ability to move around within Class E was already a big win for developers. This next thing has bolted on to add to it. So I don't think this was a completely disjointed thought process. So I think they have very purposely left B8 as well as B2 industrial, so the 2B classes there, in their own individual categories. So there's no permitted development rights. You'd have to go for full planning for that. I mean, why? I guess a lot of B8 buildings are quite large. They're generally like industrial buildings. They're industrial areas, and so giving that ability to switch over could cause lots of issues with surrounding properties and really building the properties in the wrong sort of location. B1C by definition is included because it's an industrial process that can be carried on fundamentally in a residential area. So most of those B1C buildings are in residential zones and can easily go across to residential. So honestly, Mark, I don't think it will be for the future. I think they probably now, if this consultation gets approved and the 1st of August it comes in as is, I think that's what we're going to be set with for a while. But yeah, certainly not unhappy with that. But good question, Martin. Ian, what's the next one?
We've had a few people asking for clarification of what's actually included in Class E, so I can give you a quick rundown. It is a very quick one. So shops, financial and professional services, but not medical, cafes and restaurants, offices, research and development buildings, light industrial, clinics, health centres, creches, day nurseries and day centres, and gymnasiums, indoor recreations, not involving motorised vehicles or firearms. Sounds like an exciting day out, doesn't it? So there you go. So it's a fairly broad range of buildings, and some of those, certainly the ones at the end of my list, haven't been converted. I don't think they've had rights to convert before. So interesting also, I think, particularly with light industrial. It's a bit of a sweet spot for light industrial, but it was an area where we had the right up until September. It then went away. We were scrabbling around trying to work out the ways in which we could do it using Class ZA and various other things. Now it comes back into play, yeah, with a bang, because there's no size restrictions. The previous one was 500 square meters. Now it's in Class E. There's no size restrictions, assuming this goes through, and yet it still has all the advantages of the light industrial building, as it always did have, which is most of the world will be focusing on commercial and retail, and the old, run-down, decrepit, unloved light industrial building will still sit there, and makes a fantastic opportunity for developers that know how to do it. So we're quite pleased about that. So there you go, a rundown of Class E.
I've got a question for Tim, Ian, and this one's for you, because Tim has clearly turned up late, because I'm just looking on the schedule when people arrive. So he's turned up late and he missed your initial presentation, or certainly part of it, because he's asked a question which I think you actually mentioned. So Tim's question is, so shame on you, Tim, but we'll let you off this evening. Tim's question is, are there restrictions on the new PD rights within sites of special scientific interest, national parks, conservation areas, etc.? Do you want to reconfirm that to Tim?
So Tim, yes, there are. So SSIs, monuments, listed buildings are excluded. So yeah, the status quo on those, you won't be able to convert those, or anything that sits within the grounds of a monument or listed building. The one that's different is conservation areas. Many town centres are in conservation areas, and so therefore it'd be a bit of a nonsense if the government's ambition with this PD right is to change our town centres. Then clearly it needs to be able to change them despite the fact that there's a conservation area there. So there will undoubtedly be some prior approval boxes to tick when it comes to conservation, I would expect. Devil will be in the detail. Let's see what comes out, but I can't see that it could be a blanket ban. So yeah, conservation areas will be in scope.
And Tim says, sorry about that. He was putting his daughter to bed. Shame on you, Tim. You not only turned up late, you're now blaming it on your young daughter. That's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. Ashley's question is, does an Article 4 remove all PD rights in the designated area or remove it for selected PD classes? Ashley, it's whatever the local authority decides. So it's not all rights. They can dictate in certain areas what they do. So one of the common ones a lot of people will perhaps recall if they're into it is HMOs. A lot of restrictions that council put on HMOs under an Article 4 because they want to keep family homes in areas. So that's a common use. Yes, it has been used to restrict offices, and so they can designate what they want. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a blanket coverage. Hopefully that's covered that. We've got another one, Ian. We're getting through a lot tonight.
A question here from Stephen. Evening, Stephen. He says, "Evening, guys. Do you know if there will be a CIL that's community infrastructure levy payment requirement?" Well, the whole issue of the CIL, which was the CIL was, I think it's the artist formerly known as CIL. I think it's now IL. It's just an infrastructure levy, but I think that's still in the offing. There's still a debate going on about what that's going to look like, whether it should apply to permitted development and exactly how that should apply. So I suspect, I'm doing that from memory, but I suspect that whatever comes out of that discussion is going to apply to this PD right. But it's a bigger question. It's the whole infrastructure levy arrangement is the subject of a separate dialogue, separate consultation, and so that's been going on for some time. So I suspect we'll find out fairly shortly in the new year what that looks like, and then whatever those rules are, I'm sure they will apply to all PD rights, including this one. There you go, Stephen.
Good stuff. Ashley says, great. Thank you very much. Very helpful. Will says, he says, is this likely to mean that I could convert an old bank building into residential? Yes, Will, you can. Okay, well, you hopefully can do. Okay, so currently bank building A2, which is a financial use class, is going to be under Class E. Obviously, you can't convert it at the moment, but if this new suggestion comes into play, then it is Class E. It was a Class E from the 1st of September 2020, which is the date stamp on this. And on that basis, yes, you can convert it. And there are a huge amount of old bank buildings around that people struggle to know what to do with. There's lots of other things you can do with them. You can convert banks into offices and do other things like that. But yeah, banks into residential is going to be quite an interesting proposition. One just word of warning, just think carefully about what's in that bank, particularly the vaults, and how you incorporate that into a residential scheme. Don't think you can just remove that and throw it in a skip out the back. There's a lot of money involved in that. But yeah, Will, you definitely can. Okay, what's next, Ian?
We've had a few questions in about dates. So we've mentioned a few dates here. So just to recap, this one's for you all. Actually, Gabriella asked specifically about the dates with regard to when space standards come in. So that's in April. That means that it doesn't apply before then. So if you get your PD right application for prior approval in before then space standards won't apply. The other dates that are relevant in particular is when a lot of PD rights have what they call date stamps, which is that in order for the permitted development right to apply, the building that you're looking to convert had to have been in the kind of the use class that you're converting it from as at a certain date. This prevents all sorts of things, including you deciding to build something brand new and then convert it and kind of get around the system. So what the new rules are, or will be, or proposing to be, is that the 1st of September will be the cutoff 2020 for buildings that are Class E. So come 1st of August next year, these PD rights will come in. If your host building was in Class E as at the 1st of September 2020, then you can convert it. We had some previous date stamps that applied here that were going back to, I think, 2013. So this now brings into scope an awful lot more buildings. I mean, if we think about it, we've got, well, if it was 2013, again, that's from memory, but we've got 7 years worth of buildings that are now in scope. And also a lot of those previous PD rights, some of them had size restrictions, and now there aren't any. So some of the bigger buildings wouldn't have been convertible, and now they are. So it really has created a very interesting sort of situation where lots of buildings now are coming into scope. And I think it's going to be particularly interesting as we get into a place in the economic cycle that we're likely to see next year, where lots of these properties are coming onto the market. We've got situations, businesses are likely to go bust. Certainly a lot of landlords are looking to perhaps giving some serious consideration as to what they're going to do with these buildings. We've got home working, which has made some of the larger tenancies untenable, and people looking to effectively downsize and move into more local environments. And here actually is a route out for some of those landlords who have got a building that used to be rented out to perhaps a larger organization in the center of town, no longer viable for that, but actually is it viable now for residential? So yeah, it's all going on.
Good stuff. There's a question which is pretty much aligned with what you said there, Ian, but it's a specific one that let's just clarify it from Josh. So evening, Josh. He says, I know of an office that was built here it was built 3 years ago and is up for sale. I couldn't convert it before, but I'm assuming I could now under the PD rights, you know, because of the date stamp. Yes, exactly that. It goes on a bit more than that. I was just paraphrasing, but basically, Josh, yes, you can. So this is the thing that Ian's talking about. There's going to be a potential, quite a big rush for all those office buildings that people dismissed because of the date stamp now will come back in. So yeah, some great opportunities. Okay. Let's have a look. Raj's got a comment. Raj says, hello, A-team. If you say A-team, then you always get your question picked up. Well, not necessarily, but, you know, it helps. Thanks, very helpful. Oh, no, sorry, I'm reading the one above. He says, great to be with you. With the economy on its knees and many of the PD right opportunities will be on the market. In your view, are there deals to be done with owners on a kind of JV, where we do the work and pay them after the development is completed? A bit more than I'll give them a bit more than they had on the market. No, Raj, no, don't do JVs. You don't have to. You don't have to do JVs, okay? People fall into this trap. They want to go out and start doing joint ventures with people, and the majority of joint ventures in this industry fall down, okay? If the building is stacks up, if the deal stacks up, you'll get the money to do the deal. You don't need to do a JV, okay? It is like a marriage. You're going to go into a marriage with someone that you probably don't know. Are your values exactly the same? What if the going gets a bit rough? You know, how do you really know this building owner? You don't. You just don't. Too many JVs fall apart. So a strong recommendation is you don't do JV with building owners. Now, it's a very simple route. People go, oh, it's easy because I don't have to borrow the money. You know, I can then leverage straight against the site unencumbered. No. You know, would you suddenly open up a business in manufacturing with a person that you've never really met before just because they've got a warehouse? You wouldn't. You'd think very carefully about who you'd go into business with. Imagine how hard I had to think about going into business with Ian.
It wasn't. Yeah, you weren't unique in that respect.
No, that's true. Yeah, it works both ways, doesn't it? So, Raj, no, definitely don't do JVs because you don't need to. Simple as that. Okay, next question here. See if we can get a couple more in, a couple of quick ones before we wrap up for Christmas.
Okay, Dan asks, I don't think I've had this one. What do you think the chances are of the new PD rights proposal getting approval? Well, I would say, yeah, pretty good. It is a consultation. Government is covering quite a few bases within it, but there's quite a few battles raging at the moment on the planning side, as you probably will have gathered. And most of the noise at the moment isn't around this one. I think, as I said earlier, I think one of the key concerns that I think everybody will have is that we don't want our town centres to become purely residential. And the challenge that exists there is that obviously whatever for want of a better word, strategy or conversion strategy delivers the best return for a developer is the one that most people are likely to go for. So quite obviously, so if that is residential, then left unchecked, you could see a situation where everything would become residential, because that's what's going to give the biggest return for the developer, and therefore the biggest check for the vendor who's selling the property. So there needs to be some controls in place that enable us to get to this sweet spot of having a town centre that actually has all of the right component parts. We've still got some retail, we've got cafe culture, we've got restaurants, we've got people living there, we've got this mix, rather than just simply turn them into town centres that people just live and no one ever goes to, because frankly that isn't a town centre, that's an ex-town centre. So we need to make sure that we get there. I'm sure there's going to be some discussions about that along the way. But what's been quite interesting, certainly there's been a lot of stuff in the news over the last couple of days regarding some of the other changes, particularly regarding the way in which the government is being perceived by certain parts of the local government to be taking power and taking too much control away, and that will allow development to go unchecked, and that the wrong types of buildings to be built. On this side, I've not yet seen anything sort of, no one's screaming from the rooftops at the moment. It might be the fact that the government led from a media announcement perspective on the schools and service buildings part rather than the town centre part, but it's there for everybody to see. And at the moment, there hasn't been a massive backlash. So I'm reasonably confident that it will go through. But there'll certainly be, you'll see stuff in the news. The whole issue of Boris's build, and the planning issues, but such a hot potato for actually a lot of the government MPs, from their constituencies' perspective. So there is an awful lot of discussion going on, and we'll hear all about that. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting month. But by the 28th of January, the consultation will be over, and we'll hopefully we'll find out fairly shortly after that exactly what we're left with. But I've got high hopes.
Okay, one last question from Harjinder, because I'm going to answer this very quickly. He says, did you say whether there is a size limit on buildings that we can convert? And at the moment, there appears to be no size limit. So there we go, guys. I think we need to wrap it up now, otherwise we're going to be going on into 2021, and we don't want to do that. Ian, have you enjoyed this year of Open Door? We started as support sessions, but we've now transitioned to Open Door. How have you enjoyed 2020 on Open Door?
It's been amazing. I've loved every second of it. I have to say, I don't know where the time has gone, although somehow, our early starts when we couldn't afford this type of shirt were seemed like a long time ago. But now I think 2021, fashions change, and I think Debenhams might be having a bit of a clear out. So I think you could see a whole new look. The baubles will have to go. I think they're kind of a bit of a one-off, but Debs likes my baubles apparently, so that's the best compliment I've had all day. Moving
on swiftly. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us in 2020. We started these out at the middle of the pandemic as support sessions. Some of you have been with us right from the beginning of that. I do appreciate that. We appreciate that. We transitioned into Open Door. We've always tried to make this a bit of fun. We've told it's pretty much unlike any other webinar out there. It's entertainment as much as it is content and education. No bullshit, no fluff. It's just straight as you see it. This is how we operate. We've had some fantastic guests on this year. But best of all, week after week, you guys turn up. And it's a pleasure to see all the names down here on the list coming back week after week. This is why we do it. We don't try and sell you anything out the back of that. Yes, we train people, and if out of the back of this you want to talk to us more, just contact us. There's a lot of our students that come on this, but we love it. We just love doing this. So we will be continuing to do this in 2021. We will be back on the 7th of January, Thursday the 7th of January. Give us a few weeks off, please. Thursday evenings, we're going to go and spend with our families for a change, go reintroduce ourselves. So 7th of January at 7 o'clock, we will be back. There is a replay of this, so Grigor finally apparently did manage to get audio, so we should all give him a round of applause. But Grigor, it is on a re-record. You can listen to it. Any comments in the chat box as we go would be fantastic. They are piling in. Thank you, guys. Great stuff, says Tony. Dev says, love you two, both equally. Balls or no balls? Okay, thank you much. Jumpers or no Christmas jumpers? Ranjit says, from Property Investor News, see you tomorrow. Yes, I'm presenting at an event tomorrow. Teresa says, thanks a lot, guys. PS, I like Ian's shirt. What about mine?
I've always
Teresa,
liked you.
What about mine? Merrily says, thank you so much for a great informative year. Merry Christmas, dudes. All the best for Christmas and the New Year, says Andrew. Malcolm says, is Ian writing another book next year? Wait and see, Malcolm. We'll see on that one. And Guru says, thank you for another excellent, very informative webinar. Have a great evening. Have a great evening, everyone else. Have a great Christmas. Have a fantastic 2021. Some really exciting things if you're going to get into development or if you're already in it. See you soon. Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas. Bye now.